A World of Ice and Fire is a 2017 total conversion mod for Mount and Blade Warband that takes place in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire universe at the onset of the War of Five Kings or Clash of Kings book. It is also one of the few Warband mods that I, a veteran of years and several hundred hours, have never actually played. In my quest to showcase all major Warband total conversion mods here on the channel, and with the new A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms show set to premiere in just a few weeks, I figured now was the perfect time to rectify that. Before we get started, I do want to stress that this video will only show but a fraction of what is possible within this mod. I only play for some 160 odd days, hence the title, because of my personal character goals, and that's really only just the beginning. There are several quest chains, events, and things you can do as a wanderer, vassal, or king within the world. Likewise, I want to stress that this mod is hard. Honestly, it may be the hardest Warband mod I've ever tried, which is saying something. This video may be helpful to some of you who want to get started in the world, but keep in mind I'm no expert, I've just played a lot of Warband. With that out of the way, we'll be playing as Gwayne Silverhand, the son of a merchant family from the Reach whose dreams and aspirations have taken him to King's Landing and the world at large. In this playthrough, I wanted to give Gwayne some goals I felt fit his character, much like I did in my Prophecy of Pendor video I made some time ago, so I gave him 3. 1. Own at least one business. No self-respecting merchant would be without one, so I figured this was a good first step. 2. Win a tournament. In this setting, winning a tourney is considered to be a pretty big deal, so it makes sense, and with how hard the combat can be, I figured it would be a good challenge. 3. Own a Valyrian steel sword. They're rare and expensive, 2 things a spoiled merchant's son would love. We will of course do a few other random bits and challenges which happen given the nature of Warband and this mod in general, but I won't plan for those. I like to let those be dynamic. Anyway, let's get started. As always, I'm Soul, and I hope that you enjoy. When loading up the mod for the first time and creating a character, you'll be given the option to also get a primer on the events if you're unfamiliar with the setting. Next, you'll be asked if you prefer characters and events as they are in the show or books. I chose the books. Then you have the option to choose between static or historical wars or sandbox, where basically anyone can declare war on anyone. Again, I chose the default, which is static. After this is common or trust, which is just an additional modifier where the little folk of the world can have an impact on your game if they like or dislike you. I kept this on, although I didn't notice a major difference in my game, but I guess your miles may vary. After that, you can either opt into or out of the wound system of the mod, which, if enabled, requires you to visit a maester for more serious wounds or risk a permanent injury or debuff to your character. If this is your first time with the mod, I do recommend leaving this off, as the combat is incredibly unforgiving and injuries are frequent, but I left it on for your sakes. Next, you can choose to start in Westeros or Essos, keeping in mind that if you start in Essos, you will be unable to participate in the main questline involving the North and the Night's Watch, which ends in you getting a significant discount to your own Valyrian steel sword, so naturally I'll start in Westeros. Lastly, you'll get to decide when the White Walker invasion begins. For this video, it won't make much of a difference when I choose, but don't worry, you'll get a little of them in this too. We then come to our character background, which is written out wonderfully as a sort of story on the side of the screen detailing your choices. This is the first mod I can think of that does this, and I quite like this system. Instead of having to go through the different menus, for Gwayne, I chose to be a tall Reach male who was the son of a merchant, apprenticed under one, and also became a merchant with a lust for money and power, who worships the faith of the Seven and has no remarkable qualities. Those qualities at the bottom, by the way, are just a skill you can activate in combat, basically. This way, our trading and mobility skills will be fairly high to start the game, which will make trading our main source of income much easier. From there, it's just standard Warband skill allocation, although I do recommend turning off automatic saves as this mod is brutal, and you will likely have to restart your character a few times if you leave realistic saving on. Ask me how I know. With my skill set, I just have to decide what Gwayne will look like and settled on this fairly handsome chap for Warband anyway. When starting the mod in Westeros, you will arrive in King's Landing with some flavor text to set the scene, but the beauty of it is quickly spoiled by a surge of screams and the clash of steel. Amidst the chaos, a Stark House Guard informs you that the Lannisters are purging the streets of anyone they think Stark loyalists. That includes you, and to flee for your life. Though just a merchant's son, Gwayne is no coward and rushes into the fray with his measly knife to see if he can offer aid to the people, only to quickly find that, well, a knife is not good against armored troops, and he cannot. He's no fighter, not yet anyway. Interestingly, if you do manage to defeat all the Lannisters in this section, you'll complete the quest of the Purge and be awarded with a special dagger called Silence. Since I am quickly dispatched, I don't get the dagger, and I instead wake up in a room with 3 Stark loyalists who evidently saw my struggle and dragged me off to safety. Lord Edgar tells me we are one of the lucky few to survive and that their lord, Ned Stark, has been captured. He asks us to accompany 2 Stark loyalists north to Winterfell to meet with Lord Robb Stark, Ned's son, and inform him of what's happened. When leaving King's Landing, which will be hostile to us for now, the welcome screen pops up with some general mod information if you should experience crashes, and where to go to discuss the mod if you have questions or otherwise. For my part, I recommend running the mod as I do with every Warband mod, with Warband Script Enhancer 2, which I've linked below. We know we need to make our way north, but we are quickly intercepted by 3 Lannister loyalists who aim to stop us before we can do so, beginning our first proper encounter, which I fare no better in than our first combat endeavor. In a World of Ice and Fire, you're allowed to switch between some combatants in an instance. I believe it's up to 3 or 4 times. And with control of the Stark Levy troop, I managed to survive the encounter relatively unscathed, although our brave Levy did die. Capturing one of the footmen to sell to the Night's Watch later, we head north to the Riverlands, stopping in River Run for some rest. Though it won't make much of a difference now as I only have 2 troops, in a World of Ice and Fire, your troops will suffer a morale penalty if you do not periodically rest at a camp or in cities, so it's good to get in the habit of stopping for the night early. You can also perform music for them, which I occasionally did, or take them to a brothel, which I also did, but I won't show in this video for obvious reasons. At the city menu, we can see River Run fully rendered in 3D next to our menu options. This is the same for every city or keep in Westeros, giving you a sense of what you could see if you decided to walk around. I found them to be rather beautifully realized, with some downright awe-inspiring ones like Dragonstone or King's Landing, which we will come back to later. For now, I decided to stop at the inn, where you can occasionally recruit villagers and run into Mia Stone, the bastard daughter of King Robert Baratheon, who unfortunately costs 15,000 silver stacks to hire, which is far too expensive for me at the moment. Leaving Riverrun, I head to Fair Market to grab some salt that I intend to sell when we reach Winterfell. Salt goes generally for around 250 to 300 stags a pop up there, and we can use it to trade for our main trade goods, wood and fur. Along the way, we discover the ruins of Old Stones, the former seat of the River Kings of House Mud, and with the XP gain our first level. On the road to Moat Cailin, which is on the way to the north, we come across a raven which has been shot down and bears a letter from Lord Ned Stark to Lord Stannis Baratheon of Dragonstone, brother of the late king and uncle of the current one, Joffrey. It details the illegitimacy of Robert's heirs and the legitimacy of Stannis as the true king of Westeros. A very powerful letter indeed, which I opt to take to Tywin Lannister. Now, I know what you're saying, but Gwayne, ever the businessman, is betting on the Lannisters to pay their debts, as they love to say. At Winterfell, again fully 3D rendered on its main menu screen, we sell some salt to earn us around 1,000 stags and buy as many furs as we can with our current funds, selling off some gloves we got from the Lannisters to buy a couple more. The furs are fairly expensive at the moment, but the more we buy, the cheaper they will become, so it's best to eat the cost for now. In the Great Hall, we meet with Robb Stark and deliver him Lord Edgar's message, completing our first quest. Robb must prepare for war, but he has other problems brewing further in the north, specifically wildlings raiding in villages near the wall, and asks us to go and stop a wildling raiding party for him. Though we accept, we won't be tackling this quest quite so soon, as it will require manpower we simply do not have. Leaving Winterfell, we head back south to sell our furs and begin the trade run portion of this video. On the way, we run into 3 poachers who shot down the raven whose message we intercepted earlier. Thankfully, my main troop is a Stark footman with a shield, and even though I am totally worthless in a fight and get an injury to my face, I managed to survive by the skin of my teeth as the footman, who also dies because he's too injured. After battle, you are given 4 options on how to proceed with the loot, but since I am alone and now I have no troops to protect me while I wait the hours it takes to do so, I leave them where they lie and make the dangerous solo trek south to White Harbor. Here we can charter a ferry or eventually buy a boat, which I opt not to do in this run, and go to one of the various ports in Westeros or Essos. Since I'm traveling alone, the cost is low, and for 40 stags, I head to the nearby Vale Isle of Sisterton, where I sell my furs for around 270 gold apiece, making sure to buy some food for the peasants I plan to hire and a sword so I can block enemy attacks. Heading back to White Harbor, I buy all the fur they have and head back to Sisterton again until their merchants run out of gold before heading to Maidenpool to sell the rest of my furs. There I buy a merchant's cloak, boosting my trades gold +2 for even more gold return on our trades. At Dragonstone, I buy iron for relatively cheap before returning to White Harbor to visit the Maester before my head injury becomes permanent and we suffer a -1 charisma modifier for the remainder of the run. Thank God we missed it, and for 300 stags, he heals me and I'm once again on my way. This loop of buying furs and shortly after timber and exchanging them for stags to buy salt and iron is the general loop of my trading run for about the first 3 weeks in game and beyond. It is a very lucrative experience if you don't mind trading and paying for the occasional toll by bandits, which there are a lot of in this mod, and since you'll be laden with goods, you'll not be infrequently waylaid by. I check every inn I can along the way, grabbing what peasants or levies there are in order to bolster my force to deter smaller bandit regiments from attacking me, though this does make my ferrying a bit more expensive as it goes along, but nothing I can't offset by the profit of my trade. Be warned, you will also likely be ambushed by thieves in cities a lot as well, and you will absolutely not be able to survive as the combat in this mod is as brutal as it is unforgiving. Most people will one-shot you for most of the early game. It's just the way it is. Before we proceed too much further, I do want to point out that the character menu has a host of different things for you to click on as opposed to base Warband. The mod is, in general, very good about explaining itself and showcasing its many mechanics, but I figured it was worth showing for a second. Around day 25, we come across the Crossroads Inn, which is along the way to the Vale and the north from Lord Harroway's town. Before this, we run into a random encounter, which you will see various of throughout the mod and let you earn reputation as a good or bad person and renown in the world with lords and peasants alike. At the inn, you will be able to find the quest needed to form your own kingdom in Essos, which I don't do in this run, but I figured it was worth mentioning anyway for those of you who want to. I realized around this part of my recording that I had as of yet not walked around any of the cities proper, and so when stopping off in White Harbor to of course drop off salt and iron, I decided to explore its streets and meet its guildmaster, as I plan to potentially open an enterprise or business here later. As I mentioned before, each city is very well realized and fits the flavor of the region they are in, as well as being just fun to attack if you happen to besiege them. In my experience, no two places were alike, and I can only imagine the work that went into making this possible. After 35 days or just over a month of trading and acquiring troops, I decided I was prepared enough to take on the farmstead mission Robb gave us some time ago. There's no timetable for you to complete this, besides the Red Wedding, which happens around day 150 and will feature later on in this video. With 26 troops, we entered the farmstead and began battling the raiders. Wildlings are pretty weak in comparison to many of the other enemies you'll face in the mod. They usually just have a lot of numbers, so the battle for the farmstead is actually fairly easy. After the battle, we meet with Luther Bane, who mocks us, telling us winter is coming and that the wall will not save us from the doom. Returning to Robb Stark with the news, he awards us with 600 stags, but after telling him about White Walkers, which the guy didn't say directly but apparently did off screen, Robb tells us to go to Castle Black with a letter for Jeor Mormont, the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, to see what he makes of the story. This is a pretty easy mission, but I decided to continue trading for now, as there's nothing pressing about going north at the moment, and there's stags to be made. After returning from a trade run to Winterfell, I decided it was finally time to finish the first goal of this video, and after going to the inn to buy the city a round of ales for 2,000 stags to give us 1 renown, I meet with the local guildmaster who, for 14,500 stags, will sell us a brewery that will make us somewhere around 879 stags a week. Something to keep in mind if you wish to replicate this run is that in A World of Ice and Fire, there are not many enterprises that make actual money besides breweries or ironworks, so I recommend going with one of those exclusively, unless you happen to be an Essos or Sunspear where dyeworks will actually make money. With our first enterprise purchase, we've officially completed step 1 of this video and become a proper businessman. Well done. On my run to Maidenpool following this, I found Owen of the Night's Watch at the inn, who I can finally sell off the prisoners I've been holding on to too. You can also sell these directly to various Night Watch lords or the Lord Commander if you don't like running from inn to inn trying to find one of their representatives. Having leveled a bit, I also decided to finally buy a shield for Gwayne so we can finally stop getting sniped by arrows in battle, which do absolutely ludicrous damage and will snipe me regardless, but at least it makes me feel a little bit better. At Riverrun, I meet with our first companion Dirk, a knight hopeful from Ryder who wishes to make his village proud. Who doesn't like that? Unlike other companions we've come across thus far, he only costs 6,000 stags to recruit and is a fairly formidable fighter to switch to should we get knocked out in combat, which will happen a lot. At this point in the run, aside from trade, I've also been engaging with various bandit regiments to train my troops and my own combat abilities, which I will need to do if I hope to ever win a tournament, though the progress is, admittedly, a bit slow as we are woefully weak, with most of our skills being in trade or traversal. With my coffer sitting comfortably at a regular 10,000 stags, I decided to finally go north to the wall to turn in Robb's letter and walk around Castle Black to see just how massive the wall is. After turning in the letter, it seems Robb has enlisted us to help the Night's Watch, which is not very nice of him to leave that bit out, but we aren't being sent here as a recruit, only to 1, return to Robb at the behest of Jeor Mormont to request more men for the wall, as the King of the North's wildlings invasions have become too much for them to handle properly, and 2, stop a potential raid at the Bridge of Skulls to the west. At this point, we have spent 54 days in A World of Ice and Fire, and while I'm slowly feeling more comfortable in my abilities, I don't feel perhaps strong enough to tackle this party just yet. On our way south with wood and fur, as usual, we receive a notice that the Westerlands have declared war on the Riverlands for the kidnapping of Lord Tyrion Lannister. I figured at this point this may be a good time for us to engage with the wars proper as a mercenary, so I decided to tackle a few bandits on the way down to hopefully bolster my troops with some experience and upgrades. In Maidenpool, I meet our second companion, Daisy Mormont, who is searching for her cousin Jorah to bring him to justice. Daisy unfortunately doesn't feature much in this video because of a quest for Lord Paramount Edmure Tully, who I find besieging Harrenhal and requests her services for a week, but ends up being for somewhere around a few months in-game because of my various travels. Oops. Talking to the other lords around Harrenhal, I get a request from Sir Raymond Derry to deliver a letter to Lord Paramount Tywin Lannister, who is apparently currently inside of Harrenhal that they're besieging. This is convenient for me, as I can finally turn in that letter we found from the Downed Raven earlier. First, however, I deliver Sir Derry's message and pay 3,610 silver stags for the Westerlands to stop being my enemy. Thank you very much. Then I reload the castle and deliver him Lord Ned's letter for 1,500 silver stags. It seems that a Lannister does indeed pay his debts, but I'm a bit miffed at the reward and the risk I took to get this letter to him, so upon leaving the castle, I enlist with the Riverlands as a mercenary for a month. After a trade run to the north, I make my first foray in the Clash of Kings Wars and test my luck with the main main bulk of the Riverland forces at the siege of Harrenhal, but quickly found that even with my help, the Riverlands were completely unable to win. I attempted this fight at least 3 or 4 times, and I think that the Westerland troops were just stronger, but for whatever reason they did manage to capture it after I reloaded my save and gave up on trying to help them. Though it changes hands so often, it's not really worth the effort, so whatever. For what it's worth, it is cool experiencing fighting beneath the broken keeps of that famed cursed castle, but it seems that curse extended to me as well, so it's not a big loss. Instead, when returning north, I noticed the Westerlands had taken Moat Cailin, which was currently besieged by the north, and decided to jump into the fray there instead, where the fighting was much more manageable. Though I did get knocked out fairly early on, to no one's surprise, I assumed control of Dirk, who assisted the north in retaking the keep. On my trade runs, I had also begun stopping in Gulltown to offload excess supplies, and decided because of the Vale's relative strength and neutrality to open a second brewery there to increase my profits and help pay for my quickly growing fighting force. At this point, we're around day 75 in the mod, and with 37 now battle-hardened veterans in my disposal, I went looking for the Bridge of Skulls, which I didn't need to be that worried about anyway, as you get several Night's Watch Rangers to help you with the Wildling Raiders, including some of your own force. With the combined numbers, we easily overwhelm them and stop the assault. Returning to Castle Black, I informed Jor of our success, and he thanks us, asking us to, once again, inform Robb of their need for men. At Winterfell, after my extended time in the north, I decided to convert from the faith of the Seven to the Old Gods and inform Robb Stark of the Watch's need, which he regretfully declines because of the ongoing wars of the South. Back at the wall, Jor is disappointed by the news and likewise worried by other reports that something wicked is stirring to the far north in the lands of Always Winter. We are to take Jon Snow, one of the Night's Watch's best scouts, with us on reconnaissance to see what we can find. On the way north, we discover Craster's Keep, which we will come to before our time with the main quest is over, and finally to the land of Always Winter on the borders of the game map. There we will come face to face with a genuine White Walker and an army of Whites. Keep in mind that to complete this quest, all you have to do is find their army, as fighting the Whites and the White Walker, as I quickly discovered, is a recipe for disaster. They are fast and brutally efficient, wiping out my entire force without so much as a casualty on their end before I reloaded and opted to instead leave some troops behind in order to flee south to the wall, where we give our grim report to the Lord Commander. He asks that we rally the realm to their cause, although there isn't actually anything you yourself need to do, so we can leave this for now. Back in the south, I begin assisting the north against the recent invasions by the Ironborn, who have declared themselves independent and begun raiding their lands. This is mostly because I have a financial investment in the north, and I don't trust the Ironborn to run it with the same even hand. After resting from these fights in Winterfell, word reaches us that Lord Peter Baelish has negotiated an alliance with the Westerlands and the Reach, who have declared war on the north and the Riverlands. This just keeps getting worse. While there, I also receive word from the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Something's going on in the north, and that can't be good, so I decide to head there right away. Jon informs us that the Lord Commander Jorah Mormont has been betrayed by members of the Watch and killed at Craster's Keep along with his entire force. Jon knows and trusts us and needs men besides to deal with this little rebellion, and agreeing to help, we go to the keep to eliminate the traitors. The battle is a tough one. Night's Watch troops are quite formidable in their own right, but with just 3 men to spare, one of them being our trusty friend Dirk, we manage to slay the traitors and return to Jon, who rewards us with something pretty incredible, raw Valyrian steel, which we can use to forge our own sword. This also concludes the main questline of the mod, although there are others such as one for Lord Varys and King's Landing, which do not feature in this story, but I figured it was worth mentioning. I plan on asking an innkeeper in Winterfell if he knows anything about where one could forge their own sword, and on the way we receive word that there is to be a tournament in Essos in the Volantian city of Volanteris. At the end, a man named Jorel tells us that a man in the Essos city of Qohor supposedly knows how to forge Valyrian steel. I guess with those 2 things in mind, that means we're going to Essos. For 5,231 stags, ouch, we charter a ship to Volantis and arrive in time for the tournament. At this point, Gwayne and I have spent just over 100 days in a world of ice and fire, and he is no longer the weakling slouch he once was. Battle and adversity have hardened this young merchant. With a lot of luck and some skill and a couple reloads, we managed to win the tournament, completing the second goal of this video. From Volantheris, we journey north to Qohor, traveling through dangerous Dothraki lands along the way. The blacksmith there tells me he can indeed make me a sword out of the steel, a bastard sword specifically in case you were curious, but that it'll cost 50,000 silver stags, twice as much as I'm currently carrying. Returning to the north for goods, I come across the main Godswood Grove of the old god's faith and take a walk around, looking at the large faces carved into the main tree and taking in the awe of it all. Somehow, it feels almost as though someone or something is watching us within its bleeding eyes. At some point along our journey, our contract with the Riverlands expires and I'm a free man once again. Seeing as the Reach are one of the wealthiest benefactors in the Seven Kingdoms and our ancestral homeland besides, I decide to enlist with them for a month and participate in the siege of Hornvale on their behalf. No hard feelings, Riverlands, it's just business. While helping them fight various lords in the Riverlands, I receive a notice from Lord Stannis Baratheon of a bounty against someone calling themselves the Bandit King. though I do not have footage of this pop-up as I forgot to hit record apparently before it appeared, which is annoying. The Bandit King has an army composed entirely from the bandit tree, mostly fodder, but his numbers are far too great for me to take on alone, some 1,300, only I'm not alone. With a bit of careful maneuvering, I managed to bait his army to attack me while standing near several Reach armies. Although their armies are skillfully superior, the fight is far from easy. I actually had to reload this encounter about 3 times, and in the end only managed to survive with about a dozen or so troops left on the battlefield, if you can believe it. A king indeed. After his defeat, the Bandit King tells me why he did it, that the death of his loved ones drove him to punish the lords of the 7 kingdoms for their greed and cruelty, but I care little for his talk, and lobbing off his head to show Stannis, take his equipment for my own. I head for the port of King's Landing to take a ferry for Dragonstone, but not before walking around the streets to see the glory of the capital and its famed Red Keep for myself. I do the same in Dragonstone, which is arguably even more impressive, and turn in my bounty to Lord Stannis for 5,000 stags and a rare weirwood bow, much like the kind the famed Brynden Bloodraven Rivers once used. I wonder whatever happened to him. From here I participate in a few more Reach encounters, assisting them with taking Flint's Finger from the north, again no hard feelings, and must say I quite enjoyed the variety of the keeps in this mod. I know I mentioned it at the beginning of the video, but it's so refreshing to go into different encounters and they actually be different. It's really, really nice. On the way south to Highgarden for a feast, I receive an invitation for a wedding of Edmure Tully and Robb Stark at the Twins, with the invite asking who I'd like to attend for. Since I'm somewhat a close friend, or at least an acquaintance of both of them, I decide to pin myself as a guest for the two of them, locking myself into their portion of the Red Wedding quest. You can also opt to side with the phrase if you like. Though I've not mentioned it thus far, I'm getting these quest details from the World of Ice and Fire quest wiki page, which I'll link below. Now, normally attending this wedding would be no issue once you've received the invitation. However, as a mercenary for the Reach, I'm unable to do so, as they're at war with both parties presently. But this does not lock me out of participating, which means I have to get creative. And the only way I know how to get creative in this case is to break my mercenary contract, which the only way I know how to do that is to swear vassalage to the king of whatever faction you belong to, and then break your oath for the relation hit with the faction leader. Doing this, I'm still able to fly my own flag, as I am now technically a lord, and I decide to fly the Weirwood tree in honor of our new faith. At the Twins, the Red Wedding will begin as soon as you enter, with a battle outside of the Twin Keeps. You don't need to win this battle, as upon getting knocked out, you will be injured, quote, but still able to go inside. In the Great Hall beside Robb, Edmure, and his many forces, we managed to turn the tide and stop the horrors of the Red Wedding from ever happening. With this, House Frey and Bolton join the Westerlands in the Battle of the Bastards, a potential event around day 360 to 400 against Jon and Ramsay Snow will never take place. With enough money collected and some well-earned fame besides, I think it's time to head back to Qohor and finish this video. In the city, we give the blacksmith 50,000 gold and Valyrian steel, and he requests we return in a week for our sword. I occupy my time by winning what must have been, outside of maybe the Elven tournaments in Prophecy of Pendor, the hardest tournament I have ever fought in a Warband mod. Even with my shiny new heraldic armor and a pretty nice longsword to boot, I must have reloaded this tournament 7 to 10 times after coming close, like quarter semifinal every single time. It was awful. From there, I returned to Qohor to pick up our beautiful new Valyrian steel bastard sword, which I named Resilience in my own headcanon, something I needed a lot of to complete this run. But sadly, Gwayne's fortunes would not hold out. Upon leaving Qohor, he, Dirk, and Daisy, who I grabbed just before returning to Essos, were attacked and decimated by a Dothraki horde. Limping back to Westeros after escaping their prisons nearly broke but with sword in tow, Gwayne told the two of them that they would be fine if they returned to their trading ways and would build up a new force in no time. But on the way to the Riverlands, they were ambushed by a small party of robber knights with a large horde of prisoners. Though they could have paid for their fare, with a gambler's heart, Gwayne opted to challenge them to fight instead, and the three took the field one last time. Watching as the armored knights barreled forward, weapons poised to strike, Gwayne looked to his companions, weapons ready, and laughed, saying, "Let's see how they like the taste of Valyrian steel." The earth began to shake, and the son of a merchant family, now a tournament champion and a lord, raised his sword to strike.